On October 4th, 1957, Americans went to bed in a world where space belonged to no one. They woke up in a world where space belonged to the Soviet Union. It was a metal ball, 58 centimeters across, the weight of a motorcycle. It did nothing except orbit the Earth and go beep, and it made the most powerful country on Earth panic like it had never panicked before. The Soviets had just launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, and America had no idea it was coming. No warning, no intelligence, nothing. Just a beep from the sky telling them they were losing a war they did not know they were fighting. What followed was 12 years of the most expensive, dangerous, and scientifically insane competition in human history. Two superpowers spending billions of dollars to be first in space, using technology that barely existed, with rockets that exploded regularly, sending humans into a void where no human had ever been. And the people who made it possible were two men who should never have been working for either side, a Nazi rocket scientist and a Soviet prisoner who had survived Stalin's gulags. This is the space race, and it is the dumbest, smart thing humanity has ever done. To understand the space race, you have to understand 1945. World War II had just ended. Two countries had emerged as superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. And they hated each other, not just politically, existentially. Each side believed the other wanted to destroy it. Each side had nuclear weapons, and each side knew that the country that could deliver a nuclear bomb to the other's territory fastest would win any future war instantly. The delivery system for nuclear bombs was the missile, long-range ballistic missiles. The same rockets that could put a satellite in orbit could put a nuclear warhead anywhere on Earth in 30 minutes. Space was not about exploration, not at first. Space was about who controlled the highest ground ever conceived. If you could put a weapon in orbit, you could hit anyone on the planet. Sputnik was not a scientific achievement. Sputnik was a military threat wrapped in a beep. Both sides understood this instantly, which is why America's reaction to Sputnik was not wonder, it was terror. Here is the uncomfortable truth about the space race. Neither the Americans nor the Soviets had the technology to start it. They got it from the same place, Nazi Germany. During World War II, a German engineer named Wernher von Braun had built the V-2 rocket for Adolf Hitler. The V-2 was the world's first long-range ballistic missile. It killed thousands of people in London and Antwerp. It was built using slave labor from concentration camps. Thousands of prisoners died building the rockets that then killed other people. Von Braun was not a simple man. He was a member of the Nazi Party and the SS. He knew about the slave labor, but he also genuinely believed that rockets were the future of humanity, and he was willing to work for whoever would let him build them. When Germany collapsed in 1945, von Braun did something practical. He surrendered to the Americans. He and over 100 of his engineers loaded their rocket designs onto trucks, drove to the American lines, and gave themselves up. He wanted to go to America. He thought America would let him build bigger rockets. He was right. The U.S. government brought him and his team to America under a secret program called Operation Paperclip, quietly erasing their Nazi records and putting them to work. Von Braun would spend the next 20 years building the rockets that took Americans to the moon. The Soviets got their own German rocket scientists, the ones who had not managed to reach the American lines in time. But they also had someone far more important, someone whose name they kept secret for decades. Sergei Korolev was the chief designer of the Soviet space program. He designed Sputnik. He designed the rocket that launched Gagarin. He designed virtually everything that made the Soviets competitive in the space race. And for years, nobody outside the Soviet Union knew his name. The Soviets kept his identity completely secret. He was referred to only as the chief designer. They feared the Americans would assassinate him if they knew who he was. His story before the space race was not the story of a celebrated genius. In 1938, during Stalin's Great Purge, Korolev was arrested. He was accused of sabotaging the Soviet rocket program, a charge fabricated by a colleague who wanted him out of the way. He was tortured into signing a confession he had not written and sentenced to a labor camp in Siberia. He spent years in the gulags. He nearly died. His teeth fell out from scurvy, and he was transferred to a special prison laboratory, a sharashka, where talented prisoners were forced to work on military projects. After the war, Stalin released him. Korolev went back to rockets. He had survived the gulags, the torture, the near starvation, and he came back with the same obsession he had before: space. He just wanted to go there. By 1957, Korolev had developed an intercontinental ballistic missile, the R-7, powerful enough to reach American territory with a nuclear warhead. The Soviet military was interested, but Korolev had a different idea. He proposed putting a satellite in orbit. The military was skeptical. Why waste a missile on a metal ball? Korolev argued the propaganda value would be enormous. The first country in space would demonstrate technological supremacy to the world. The Soviets approved. Korolev built Sputnik in less than 3 months, 58 centimeters across, 84 kilograms, with a single radio transmitter broadcasting a continuous beep any radio ham in the world could receive. On October 4, 1957, the R-7 lifted off from Kazakhstan. Sputnik entered orbit. The beeping began. Within hours, amateur radio operators worldwide were picking up the signal. The next morning, the New York Times ran it on the front page. Eisenhower tried to downplay it publicly. Privately, the U.S. government was in full panic. The Soviets had demonstrated their missiles could reach any point on Earth, and they had done it first. The American response was immediate, chaotic, and expensive. Congress poured money into science and math education. NASA was created in 1958 specifically to compete. But before NASA could do anything impressive, America suffered a string of humiliations. On December 6, 1957, America attempted to launch its first satellite, Vanguard TV-3, live on television. The rocket rose 4 feet, lost thrust, fell back, and exploded. The satellite popped off and sat on the ground. Beep! The Soviets offered to give America aid through the UN Program for Developing Nations. The joke was not subtle. America's press was brutal. Flopnik, Kaputnik, Stay Putnik. Von Braun's team launched Explorer 1 on January 31, 1958. It worked, but the Soviets were already 3 months ahead and about to extend that lead in a way nobody had imagined. Before Sputnik had faded, the Soviets launched Sputnik 2, carrying a passenger, a dog named Laika. Laika was a Moscow street dog, chosen because strays were assumed to be tougher. Fitted with biosensors, she launched on November 3, 1957, 1 month after Sputnik. There was no plan to bring her back. The Soviets said she survived several days before dying peacefully. The truth, revealed decades later, she died within hours from overheating. Then, on April 12, 1961, the Soviets achieved something that made everything before it look modest. Yuri Gagarin, a 27-year-old Air Force pilot, became the first human in space, orbiting Earth once in 108 minutes aboard Vostok 1. He became the most famous person on Earth overnight. Charming, humble, photogenic, and Soviet. The perfect propaganda weapon. America had no answer. On May 25, 1961, 6 weeks after Gagarin, Kennedy stood before Congress and said something that stunned even his advisors.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
America had been in space in 15 minutes. NASA engineers were horrified. They didn't know how to land on the moon, how to bring humans back, or whether people could survive deep space radiation. Kennedy either didn't know or decided the uncertainty was the point. America needed a goal so large that winning it would be undeniable. The budget was staggering. At its peak, NASA received 4.4% of the entire federal budget. Today, it's under 0.5%. Apollo employed 400,000 people, the largest peacetime engineering project in history. While America was building Apollo, Korolev was working on his own moon program, but his health was failing. In January 1966, he went in for what was supposed to be a routine operation. Surgeons found colon cancer. During the procedure, his heart stopped. He was 59. His identity was finally revealed after his death. The man who put Sputnik in orbit and sent Gagarin to space had been so classified that even his wife couldn't tell friends what he did. His death devastated the Soviet program. No one of equivalent vision replaced him. The Soviet moon rocket, the N-1, was built by committee, plagued with problems and exploded 4 times in testing. The Soviets never reached the moon. On July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 lifted off from Kennedy Space Center. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins. Destination: the Sea of Tranquility. 4 days later, the Eagle began its descent. At 1,000 meters, the computer started throwing error alarms, the 1202. A 26-year-old engineer named Jack Garman had memorized every alarm code and told Mission Control it was safe to continue. Armstrong took manual control when he saw the landing zone was covered in boulders. He found flat ground with 17 seconds of fuel left.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
6.5 hours later, Armstrong stepped onto the surface. He was supposed to say, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." He dropped the A, the most famous misquotation in history. 600 million people, 1/5 of humanity, watched live. Still, the largest simultaneous television audience in history relative to world population. The Soviets didn't broadcast it. They aired a nature documentary, but their tracking stations were watching. They knew America had won the space race. The space race officially ended, but what it left behind was extraordinary. The microchip was miniaturized, partly because NASA needed computers small enough for a spacecraft. GPS grew from space race satellite technology. The camera in your phone uses a sensor developed to send images from space. Memory foam, scratch-resistant lenses, water filters, freeze-dried food, CAT scans, all advanced by the space race. But the most important legacy is simpler. For a moment in 1969, the entire human species looked up at the moon, knowing 2 people were standing on it. Von Braun watched Apollo 11 launch from the VIP stands. He wept. Korolev was 3 years dead. He never saw it. But the obsession that kept him alive in the gulag, the conviction that humans belonged in space, had turned out to be correct. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to Built and Busted, because next time, we are covering another moment when humanity did something completely insane and completely magnificent.